the top of the hour. Today's webinar, Best Metrics for Your Contact Center. We're going to look at what is the right metric or what are the right metrics to use in your contact center and see if there is a better one. So let's go through the agenda. I'm Jonty Pierce. I'm going to be moderating today. Delighted to be joined by Carolyn Blunt from Real Results. Carolyn, welcome to you.
Thank you, Jonty.
And Carolyn was voted in our poll of the top 100 most respected people in the contact center industry, was voted #1 on that list and is a regular contributor to our webinars. We're also speaking with another webinar. I think, Paul, this is your third webinar.
I think it is.
Paul White is Chief Executive from MPL Systems and is going to be looking at balance metrics and also the use of technology in terms of how to look at the best metric for your contact center. And we're going to be taking top tips and your questions as you go along. If you use hashtag tip for a tip and hashtag question for a question, we have a box of champagne or a box of chocolates, your choice, on the best tip that's left in the chat room, which is at callcenterhelper.com/chat. And you can also download the webinar slides. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. If you want to watch a replay of today, and we're going to be going through a lot of material, that's on the same link as you've dialed into today. A white paper is going to be coming out to you afterwards from MPL Systems as well. So the discussion is going to be on the chat room. Just go in callcenterhelper.com/chat, log in first name, last name, and email. And this is an example of what it looks like. Everyone's logged down the right-hand side here. You can hit this button here when you're logged in, and you can download the webinar slides. And we've got going to have quite an active discussion going on through that. So what I'd like you to do is log into the chat room, callcenterhelper.com/chat, and I'd like to understand from you in 1 or 2 words, how would you say, how well is your contact center performing? So is it bubbling along? Is it in excellent condition? Is it could do better? Which I think was my school report. So how would you, since we're looking at metrics, define how your contact center is performing?
Honest answers only, of course.
So Steve says it's on target. Martin says quite well. Who else we've got? Getting there says Annette. Daniel says awesome-mazingly, if I've got that. So amazingly and awesome. Progressing nicely, says Chris. Vlad says quite flexible. Michael says it's doing well. Dennis says I'm responsible for our EMEA customer service strategy, and there's a big difference between countries. Gail says it's good. Eileen progressing well, going in the right direction, good results, making good progress. Well, I think everyone's scoring very well on that. So
sounds fantastic.
I wonder if your customers would be scoring it in quite the same way. And what I'd like to do is just put up a poll for you, and I'd like to understand what metrics do you use in your contact center. If you'd just like to put up all the metrics that apply to you. So we've got average handling time, net promoter, first contact resolution, customer effort scores, and quality scores. So if you'd just like to vote on all of those that apply. We've got 135 people logged in, and I think most of you have now voted. So we'll just close that up, and we'll show it up on the screen. So that's quite interesting. For the first time, average handling time is not the top metrics on there. Quality scores used by most people, 80%. Customer effort score is quite low, about 28%. So we're just, I would like to drill down a little bit more detail now and say which metrics are the most important. So if you could perhaps press, so we'll just get the poll up. Which metrics are the most important to you? If you perhaps pick the 2 metrics that are most important to you, and we'll see which one comes up. Carolyn, any guess for which one's likely to come up high, do you think?
Well, Well, I think we're seeing a shift away from Net Promoter towards customer effort. So it'll be interesting to see if people are on that curve or if Net Promoter is still really popular. I think AHT has declined, so I'll go for FCR and customer effort.
Okay, well, it's a bit of an each way bet there. So let's have a look and see if how
They're
that,
all good metrics, aren't they?
how that comes up. So actually, we're seeing average handling time is that is actually bottom of the list. Well done to everyone in the audience. That's exactly where I put it. Quality score is 61%. First contact resolution. I've noticed in the last 6 months or so is really starting to come up the scales of all the surveys we do. And I'd just like to drill down on that one little bit more, and I'd like to ask the question, if you go into the chat room now, so we're jumping around from one system to another, if you're one of the 57% who put down first contact resolution, how do you measure first contact resolution in your contact center? Because there's lots of different ways of measuring this. It's not like a simple question you can ask. And we like to see, if you just go into the chat room and put down how you measure it. Jack is saying no callback from clients. Michelle is saying through quality assessments. I wonder what other ones we've got. Sue from complaints volume and quality checking. Annette says this has always been a struggle, which is I think why I'm asking the question. Michael, as a result of survey results. Chris says we measure first call resolution by callbacks and quality. Martin says no callback from and to a client. Quality assessments with no calls back noted. Analysis of gaps between repeat calls, quite interestingly. Email ticket closed on first reply. Escalation, non-escalation of complaints and requests. Daily updates on whiteboards with number of contacts from customers' complaints. Calls are routed to a survey which asks the question, did we resolve your inquiry today? I guess the downside with that is that you may have answered the inquiry then, but if it's the problem's still ongoing.
It's the no callback ones that worry me. Have they gone somewhere else?
Yeah. Or indeed calling back for a different reason. So it'd be quite interesting to see the number of incoming calls divided by the calls unable to answer and messages taken for us to call them back. So lots of different ways of doing that. If anyone's doing it on callbacks, I'd be quite interested to understand, how do you distinguish between someone calling back on that issue and someone calling back on, say, a different issue or a different inquiry? So be fascinated to see that. And is there a time involved? So that's enough on first contact resolution for the time being. We're now going to go off and we're going to have a presentation from Carolyn Blunt, who's with real results. And Carolyn, you were voted in the top of our survey, the best respected people in the contact center industry. We ran that 2 years ago. We'll be doing it again later this year. And Karen, I think you're going to be taking us through a comparison of various metrics within the contact center and looking at how they compare.
I am, yes, if that's all right, and I'm going to try and keep it to sort of 12 minutes and hand over back to you guys and Paul. So yeah, the best metrics for your contact centre. This is I could have talked on this for about an hour, I think. So I had to just kind of focus in on some key ones. So I'm not going to go into this and waste any time on my background, but as Jonty's already said, I work for a company called Real Results, and that's just a bit of background to me. And these are the sort of 7 commonly used metrics, and I'm going to go through and focus on the first 4 and look at the pros and cons of each, and I'll be really interested in your questions as well when we get time at the end of the webinar. So first of all, let's dive in and look at average handling time. Because as we've already seen from the poll, I think the popularity of average handling time as a metric has declined for obvious reasons, which we will talk about. But for me, I do still see quite a lot of pros with AHT. I think it does give us a really good handle on efficiency. So if we don't know how long a piece of string is, then it's quite difficult to plan for that effectively and to put any numbers around that and to understand what is our cost to serve each customer. So I personally wouldn't like to run a contact centre without some visibility of this particular metric, and I think it is still really useful. I also like it because it helps us to identify issues within particular agents and advisors' calls. So if there are lengthier calls and I get that as a flag, then I can drill down and look at, is it long silences, or is that agent putting them on hold for a long time, or are they waffling on and not getting to the point and they need help around communication skills training and keeping calls on track? Are they getting into conflict situations on the phone? So I think AHT is a great flag. It gives us quite a lot of valuable information to identify issues. I also think it's really important to have to inform our planning decisions, so our shift allocation, planning our full-time, part-time, out of hours, so that we can see some patterns to that and we've got something that we can plan and work towards. So I think it's really useful for that. And I think generally that whole piece comes together to give us guidance about, you know, how we run our contact centre, and guidance for our agents as individuals to know how long roughly should this take. And that's where the counter argument starts to come in, because it takes as long as it takes to give a great customer experience, and I understand that. But I think for a new starter coming on board, we might want to say to them, look, in the early days it could take you longer, and then as you get quicker and you can multi-skill and you can talk and type and you can find your way through the systems and the knowledge base, then that will start to get shorter, and it gives them something to kind of work towards that I think is really useful. So yes, some of the cons with AHT and why people have fallen out of love with this is because it can be seen to hinder quality, because like we've kind of touched on in our intros, we were talking about first call resolution being really important, and you know, are we even measuring that right in terms of callbacks? So AHT could cause the same problems if we are rushing through calls to get rid of them, and they basically just end up having to call back because we haven't answered their question effectively and we've just rushed them off the phone. So that can be a problem. And then there are other things around it which we will potentially say that AHT can impact on the stress and retention of agents, and also the cultural message that it sends out, in that, you know, we can get a bad press as a contact centre industry of this whole battery hen kind of image with the big bad boss standing over us, and targets and wallboards and, you know, klaxons sounding, you know, when you go to the toilet for too long. And so there's a whole thing about AHT potentially contributing to that message if we beat agents around the head with it as a metric and really target them really hard with it. It can make them feel under stress. It can make them say, this job is not for me. And I don't think that contributes to the cultural message for the organisation and for contact centre industry as a whole. So there's a balanced kind of argument on AHT. Moving on to think about NPS, so Net Promoter Score. There are some positives with this, in that it is a very simple, outcome-focused metric that enables us to get a real kind of sense check for what is that customer's feedback. You know, would you recommend our organisation to your friends and family? We can get, you know, a yes or no kind of sense as to how likely that is. We want to link that to our social customer service strategy, so that we can start to see that we are creating more promoters than detractors online by being really quick and cohesive in our responses on Twitter and Facebook, and that we can report return on investment for our social customer service strategy, and argue that, you know, we're moving in the right direction in terms of brand perception and loyalty. And it's a great word of mouth marketing tool. But the negatives with this are that the question can cause some confusion, because how likely are you to recommend us? I can say, you know, yes, I'm very likely to do that. But I might also say, no, I'm not likely to do that, because I'm just not the sort of person who goes around recommending that other people buy the same pension plan as me, for example. That's their decision, and that's not for me to get involved with. So I think that the question causes confusion for some people. It's not as clear-cut as did you like our service and therefore would you recommend our service. It's how likely are you to recommend us, and that could come down to my personal preferences on that. There's not a proven link really to revenue change. So all this effort and work that goes into doing improvements to get the Net Promoter Score up it's got to be good stuff, but we're really struggling to find direct correlation on revenue change. I'm yet to see really robust findings that can demonstrate that, but that's kind of like the industry that I work in training. Sometimes there are so many other variables that it's hard to prove that the training that we've delivered is the sole contributor to that step change. So it's also quite hard to derive some actions from that. It's an outcome-focused metric rather than a process one, so it doesn't enable us to say, and this is the reason why, and these are the actions we then need to take to address and rebalance that. So that can be a bit challenging with this as well. Moving on to look at customer effort. So
I think there's also another problem with Net Promoter Score, which is that it's also dependent on, would you recommend the company? You may have had a very good service experience with the contact center, but would you recommend the company maybe based on other factors? For instance, when I was down visiting British Gas, they said every time they put the price of gas up, the Net Promoter Score drops by 10 points, which is not really a reflection on the contact center.
Yeah, exactly. It's more holistic, isn't it? And when they're doing things like #AskBG, there's so many other variables that come into that. So customer effort, pros for that. Again, this is quite a simple one to use. It's a scale of traditionally 5. You can move that up now to 7. Although having looked at that, I don't know how much value that really adds. But it's a better predictor of loyalty. So if we take kind of some of the traditional stuff of good service is no service, this whole idea of silent service. So actually, if I'm a British Gas customer, for example, the best service is when I don't need to contact British Gas. There is no fault to my supply. My supply just flows. My bill is accurate and it just goes by direct debit, and there's just no need for me to contact the contact centre. That's kind of low effort, and I would want to kind of keep good service being no service. So it's a good predictor of loyalty, because we do see that the more I have to work as a customer to make those contacts, to chase up, I'm spending time worrying about, have you fixed the mistake in my bill, or is my next direct debit going to be wrong as well, and I'm not getting that feedback, it does drop. So this is a better predictor of loyalty, and it really will help to identify improvements, because we can produce a flow chart of where are the pressure points, how many times did that customer have to contact us, and where are the touch points in the service chain, and how can we streamline and simplify that and make it as easy as possible for customers to do business with us. Some of the negatives with this one is that it can exclude other factors, so price, product, competitors. There will be other things that will affect somebody's decision to potentially leave your organisation, that aren't just about customer effort. So I'll talk a bit more about some of those, because there are 6 kind of recognised factors, and customer effort is only one of them. So very quickly now, personalisation. So that is something that voice of the customer and stuff like that, it's a huge theme. The degree to which an experience meets specific needs. So how much can we flex and personalise that experience to suit that customer. Secondly, we also need to be thinking about resolution, so that's how we turn a poor experience into a great one, and statistics show us that actually that is the key where we can really develop great improvements around loyalty. Third one is around integrity, so putting the customer ahead of our own interests as an organisation, thinking about them and focusing on the solution for them first and foremost rather than ourselves or the cost to that. Then we've got our time and effort, so it's the effort one, around valuing customer time, so making that as simple for them as possible. We're all busy people these days. And another one around expectations, so the setting and delivering against implicit and explicit promises, and this is where at Real Results we do a huge amount of work with frontline agents in voice and email and web chat to really make sure that the language they're using spells it out to the customer, because customers are great at hearing what they want to hear. So if we're saying something like, I will look into that for you and I'll see what I can do, the customer pretty much interprets that you're going to sort it out. So it's using language instead like, I can't promise anything, but I will do my best. And for the fact that we've spelled it out, it can make a big difference to managing the expectation. And then finally, empathy, so really understanding that customer's unique circumstances and flexing to that. And one of the biggest myths that I like to bust in when I'm doing training with contact centres is this whole put yourself in the customer's shoes myth. I really don't like it. It's not about what you would feel in the customer's shoes, it's about what is that customer actually feeling, and they could prioritise completely different things to you. So it's a kind of bit of a mindset shift, that one. And then very, very quickly now on to first contact resolution. So the pros and cons of this is that it's a good quality measure, and it provides data for those that weren't first call resolution solved, so we can dig into that and see, well, why was that? Was that something the contact centre had control over, or is it further in the service chain, and how can we fix that? So I think that's really powerful, because when we see that people do get first contact resolution, we're really working on that effort score piece as well, and it really does drive a lot of quality. And it also will identify training needs. So if I can look at a call and say, right, this could have been resolved and it wasn't, it generated 2 or 3 more calls, why did that agent not know to give that information, or why did that agent not know where to find that information? And it will help me to then think about the training that needs to happen. And then the last couple of points really on the cons for this are that with first contact resolution, we need to allow for the increasing complexity that we're seeing now, particularly in the voice channel, due to the fact that most of us now are working omni-channel, and we are allowing customers to get stuff solved really quickly on Twitter and Facebook and through web chat. And what that means is they're coming to voice as a last resort. So increasingly these voice calls are more and more complex, so less likely to get FCR, and we might need to start thinking about shifting some of that target sometimes and allowing for that in the metric. And for that same reason, talk time can increase, and if we're looking at first contact resolution, it's probably going to take longer. So we need to sit that alongside our AHT metrics and targets. And there are various ways that we can measure first contact resolution, so it's about being really clear and explicit about what falls into the category of FCR and what doesn't. So if you're looking at it in other channels other than voice, if you're talking about social, then we're going to have acknowledgement as a time, and then we're going to have first contact resolution when the whole thing's actually closed, and making sure that we understand the difference and that tickets are actually closed down. So in conclusion, my point is that any metrics are better than no metrics, but it's about using the ones that work for your business, and there isn't, for me anyway, a perfect one. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, and they've got to be customised to the goals of your organisation, and we need a blend of both process ones and outcome ones. And it's not enough just to report on them. I think quite often we get into just a habit of every month we press this button, we run this report, we maybe present it at a team meeting, but what do we actually do with it? So it's about deriving actions for improvement from them, for me. And then just the last slide is just a few stats that I found really interesting. 34% of customers who don't get their inquiry or problem resolved are likely to go to your competitors. So from an FCR perspective, that's really powerful. and half of customers with unresolved issues are at risk of defection or they've already decided to leave. And 60% of all repeat calls are process or training driven. So when we're thinking about customer effort and when we're thinking about first contact resolution, I think those are favourites for me at the moment. And because it is kind of quite customised, I've put an option there which is for you to apply for a free one-to-one with me, and I can talk to you a bit more about the metrics that might be suitable for your business and anything else that's going on in your organisation at the moment. So feel free to get in touch.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that, Karen, and certainly a lot of food for thought. We've had quite a number of questions which we'll just come on to in a short while. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to put up a poll to the audience. Which metrics do you find that agents respond to most? Do you tend to find it's average handling time, net promoter, first contact resolution, customer satisfaction, or quality scores? If there's something else you think they respond to, if you'd like to pop that into the chat room. So which metrics do you think that agents in the contact center respond to most? Just like to get the results up there. It would be interesting to see how this compares with the metrics we're using and how they fit. I think most people have voted now, so we'll just share those results up on the screen. Paul, I think this is quite interesting. It's almost the quality is certainly there, but not as high. Average handling time stays about the same level, but first contact resolution has dropped down from being the second most favoured metric to sort of really low on that list.
I mean, I think it's good to see that agents are responding to the explicit statements of customer satisfaction. I think that's coming across probably from both customer satisfaction and quality scores. So I'm glad to see they're up there. I am quite surprised that FCR is perhaps as low as that.
Yeah, perhaps it's one that just agents don't relate to. Yeah. Is it sort of maybe if you're saying first contact resolution is important, but so is average handling time, you may be sending out mixed messages.
Absolutely.
So here's a question I'd like to ask in the chat room, and if you're not logged in already, it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. What metrics have you tried in your contact center, and in particular, what have you tried that has worked? And more importantly, what have you tried that didn't work? I know a lot of the audience would like to sort of share opinions on that, and some quite interesting learning that we could derive from that. So we've got 6 or 7 of you busily typing away there. So what metrics have worked for you and which ones haven't?
It'd be interesting to know if there's any competitive type stats that are going up there to see team versus team type stuff.
Yeah, it would be quite interesting. Annette says quality has worked, average handling time and schedule adherence, perhaps not surprisingly, haven't worked. Mark says calls per hour surprisingly has worked well, and agents said they liked it, which was interesting. Presumably you've got to keep quite a tight grip on quality scores with that. Chris says we measure agent available time, not ready time, and that's worked. So I guess just looking at how much agents are able to work. Wrap times worked. Eileen said it worked when we removed average handling time. It's certainly something I've been saying. Almost all the metrics work quite well, but if you explain well the formula, drivers and results to the agents works well. Getting yelled at by customers was pretty effective, says Michael. I guess that does get a certain side of results, but can burn people out. Things that have worked is QCing talk time as their personal. Things that didn't work are abandon rate, call answer time in seconds, as these not personal. Let's have a look at some of the other ones that have worked. One that gained the best customer agent reaction, says Mark, was simply asking the customer how friendly the advisor was. This is important for our values. So I think that's quite interesting. We'll come back to it a little bit in a while. So we're now on to top tips and questions. There's a bottle of champagne, not a box, as I said before, or a box of chocolates for the best tip. Use hashtag question for a question, hashtag tip for a tip, and we'll just go across and have a look at some of the tips. So Chris says we use agent available time instead of average handling time. so that agents feel free to take the time they need with the customer, but also understand there's a need to answer the calls. So there's questions from the audience. How do those measuring first contact resolution funnel out the calls that require a second call due to procedures? So if there's anyone in the audience who's got some advice on that, could work. A question for you, Carolyn, from Paul. Carolyn, do you find that Net Promoter Score gets overinflated for the contact center channel compared to the business overall results? I'm assuming it's leveled at business overall level. So, Karen, sort of how the business compares with the contact center.
Yeah, I haven't seen many people reporting on two separate NPS scores, business overall splitting out contact center specific. I don't know if anyone else has. You tend to just see a brand NPS.
So let's, yeah, if anyone's got any feeling on that, I suppose the contact center is where we often measure it because that can actually have a very pronounced influence. But if you, for instance, got engineers out in the field, that also has a very strong bearing.
Yeah, it should be. It should be holistically measuring the mentions of the brand. So whatever listening tools and monitoring tools you're using, they should be processing absolutely all mentions of the brand, and then we're working out the score from, you know, whether it's positive sentiment over negative sentiment. I haven't seen people separating it out for the contact centre specifically. Of course, you can look at comparisons to customer surveys within the contact centre environment and do it that way, I suppose, but it wouldn't be online sentiment in quite the same way.
Right, we've got quite a number of comments here on average handling time. T says, as his opinion, average handling time puts too much stress on agents. Paul says, average handling time is a useful metric for budgeting purposes, but if you're using this as a target at customer service representative level, then set an upper and a lower boundary for them to hit between. So you're not speeding up slower people or slowing down fast people. Most importantly, match it to the quality score and never treat it in isolation. Annette says, average handling time as a metric needs to be measured and kept in check at only management supervised level, but should not be made a focus. If made a focus, it could drive the wrong behavior to agents. Stay in tune with it. Sorry, stay in tune with it. Understand what is driving it up or down. Paul, any thoughts on average handling time?
Well, as I say, I think it's most of it's been covered, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a second. The thing that's surprising me that's missing is that there aren't more business metrics being put in front of the agents. There's a lot of talk about average handling time and calls. You know, how much have you sold? You know, is there a way of quantifying and motivating your agents based on their business performance, their contribution to the business? I'd like to see a few more examples from the audience, if there are any, of any people doing that.
I think that's a really interesting point, because I think in the contact centre industry we can get quite navel-gazing sometimes about...
It's all about ACDs apparently.
Yeah, and we do need to do exactly what Paul just said, more, and think about, you know, what is the impact on the business and how does this integrate.
You still need ACDs, of course, because we do sell them in MPL systems. But.
So let's have a look at this question from Amy. What's the best method for contact centre Net Promoter Score measurement? Should the measurement be taken on the first contact or only after the inquiry has been completed, resolved, or dealt with? Does anyone have an opinion on that one?
Too hard, that one.
Yeah, I think...
so what's the best method? Obviously, I think you'll 9 times out of 10 get a better outcome after the inquiry has been completed if it's been done as a first contact resolution and they're happy with it. And this is the whole argument about putting people through to post-call surveys and allowing the agents to decide, would you like to take a survey, or just not offering the survey. So we do have to be a little bit careful about that, and you know, we don't necessarily want to skew the results. We want to get a genuine reflection.
Yeah, I don't believe that there are people that still let the agents put the calls through to the surveys.
Well, there should be people around. Quite often they say, if you want to take care of the survey, stay on at the end of the call, and they say, how was that for you today? Very good, thanks, bye-bye. I hang up, and they're like, oh, I didn't do the survey. So let's have a look. Audience opinion. There must be a way to easily distinguish a department channel measure and the overall business. One could influence the other. I think we're going to be talking about
Absolutely,
that later.
yeah.
Also, we won't jump to that. You need to be clear to teams on their individual contribution to the overall objective. If you're measuring first contact resolution, includes this in coaching objectives, so they see the line of sight for objectives. There's a recommendation. Karen asking if you've got a recommendation for measuring first contact resolution. We won't handle that because we've already had quite a bit of discussion on that for a while. And Angela says, I've had success with focusing on performance metrics that they have complete control of. Their phone monitor scores are completely within their control. If we have the right monitor scorecard set up, then this should help meet our departmental goals. I make it part of their annual reviews to attain a certain score and stay part of the department. We also have a goal for the team phone monitor scores. So some very fascinating feedback there. Right, we're going to jump across now to Paul White, and Paul is going to be taking us through his presentation, which is Balance Metrics and Improving Metrics with Technology. So we'll just move the presentation across to Paul's machine, and we'll see if we can get those slides up. We're live there, Paul?
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, John T. My name's Paul White. I think you've already introduced myself. I'm the CEO of MPL Systems. A little bit about us. We're a company that specializes in multi-channel call center solutions. But in addition to the usual call center stuff, we also supply agent desktop technology that's really aimed at helping an agent optimize their performance and get the most out of the system. Anyway, today I'm going to briefly give you our perspective on some of the best metrics, but perhaps more importantly, also talk about what some of our customers are doing to optimize and measure their call center performance. So if I quickly... And Carolyn's already covered this stuff in a lot of detail, so you'd be pleased to know I'm not going to go into any more detail on the specific metrics, their definitions, and what they do. Suffice it to say that metrics, they're largely split into two groups. Task-related, those that are focused on agent activity, and those that are more business performance related. And I think, as we've already seen and been discussing, the latter have become much more widely used over the last few years. And I think, as we've already discussed as well, an individual metric will have a value, but it's normally important not to focus, in fact, in most cases it's important not to focus on a single metric in isolation of all the others. Instead, you really need to decide on the overall business objective and select a combination of both task and performance-related metrics which help represent that. It may sound quite an easy thing to do, and perhaps we already hinted that it's not, but from our perspective, there are really two issues that get in the way of getting this simply in today's contact center environment. The first of these is multiple channels, and inside most organizations, customer engagement has become a much more complicated business. In some customer service, this is only a slightly exaggerated example, but in some customer service centers, you could literally think you were in mission control. And in some of the worst cases, agents may have multiple systems, sometimes a different system to deal with the phone calls and the emails and the chat. And it's a matter of increasing complexity for the agent to manage and operate in that environment. But also, customers companies that are offering great customer service, increasingly interactions are able to span multiple channels. So, for example, a customer starts on a web chat and then continues with the same inquiry on the phone, and we really have to have in place the mechanisms not just to track them in their different channels, but as interactions can span and weave their way between sort of ever-increasing complexity of customer communication methods that are available today. Often what we find is that an organization will just focus on one channel at the expense of others, usually voice and telephone calls, but optimizing purely on this channel is typically not a very good idea for a business and may even be detrimental. I mean, we've talked a lot about first call resolution so far, and you may have loads of simple calls coming into an agent that the agent can resolve really quickly, and the contact center has got a fantastic first call resolution. But really, all of those calls could have been dealt with via a self-service mechanism. The calls only really coming through because those options weren't available in another more efficient and often in a channel that will give a better customer experience, whether that's something simple like a meter reading for a utility or a statement balance for a bank or otherwise. I think what is clear is getting multi-channel metrics right for the future is absolutely key. Voice is around and has been around for a long time, but the explosion of non-voice channels is really with us now, whether it be chat, whether it be social media, whether it be SNS. And in particular, it's driven by the younger demographics. My children wouldn't even dream of using their smartphone to make a telephone call. They'll be using the channels that are natural to them. So the multi-channel story is urgent now, and it'll be increasingly urgent in the future as that generation becomes a more and more important customer. The other key challenge that you need to consider is that customer-related activities are often spanning different departments. You may have a customer request that goes into a call center, into a planning department, and eventually gets to an engineer. And quite often individual activities within a department are not aligned across the entire enterprise. So too much emphasis can be placed on metrics in one department to the detriment of the end-to-end experience. A very simple, just a twee example really. Take the support center for a domestic appliance. A caller may come in with a problem with their washing machine. To improve first handling time or first call resolution, the agent really quickly books a call out for the engineer, whereas with a little bit of time and diagnostic script with a few careful questions, the agent could have diagnosed what was quite a common problem. Perhaps the customer needed to remove the filter in the washing machine and clean it out. But to reduce the call time, they sent the engineer out. Average handling time, fantastic. First time fix for the engineer, fantastic. But this is really something that's costing the company money. So what we're really trying to do is focus on the key metric here is that response time to the end customer problem, not the amount of time in the call center or the engineer fix time. And that's a metric you should really focus on. We've worked with a company, Games Tech, who manage fruit machines and pub gaming equipment all across the UK. And we looked at their solution and implemented an end-to-end solution that included the tracking of the customer's response times. What we found with Games Tech was that the handling times increased quite significantly in some cases because the agents were really talking to the client, understanding their problem, and working out the best engineer to send out. Average handling time up significantly, but overall the response times to the customer were improved by a fantastic 40%. So you really have to understand how that balance is going to work across those departments, and we're going to talk a little bit more now about what this balance metric looks like and what it should be for an organization. So when we talk about a balance metric, what we're really saying, what are the business objectives that you're trying to achieve, whether it be service performance that you're trying to optimize or sales performance. We've already talked about how to understand those interdepartmental dependencies. You need to sit with agents, but not necessarily in isolation. Sit with agents that cross those departments and understand their role, what impacts their role, and how working together and efficiently all those departments can work towards a common goal. Absolutely key in this scenario and in the multi-channel scenario that we talked about before is using technology to improve that handling and to break down the barriers that can often exist between different departments. We worked with the company Babcock International. They call up businesses across the UK to find placements for apprentices. What we found was the majority of the agent's time was spent searching through databases and cross-matching data. So we redesigned their processes with our intelligent desktop software, where we automatically started targeting the right data to the right agent. And in the case of Babcock, we actually got a double whammy. We actually reduced the handling time because of some of the technology automation that was taking place. But most importantly, they were able to focus on the key aspects of the call, and they managed to increase their sales lead conversion by 30%. This balance metric is something that we absolutely believe is critical in really optimizing and delivering the right solution for your environment.
So with the balance, a metric of metrics.
Maybe it's not a metric of metrics, but there's definitely not one size fits all, as Carolyn's already hinted at. But yeah, it's really about taking into account individual metrics, joining them together, and creating probably quite a custom metric for your organization that takes into the key thing is this thing that we talked about right at the beginning. What is the business objective? Average handling time may well need to go up in some organizations to achieve a business objective. So really understanding the end-to-end piece is the point we're trying to make and strive towards achieving. And as I say, I think technology and great systems are absolutely a key ingredient in breaking those barriers down. Couple more examples I'll just give you quickly. Let's look at this subject again of handling time versus service performance. And this is another example from our customer, Balfour Beatty. Balfour Beatty provide facilities management services for large organizations, the BBC, the Ministry of Defence, universities and schools across the UK. And their goal was to get an engineer out to fix issues according to certain time criteria in very, very strict SLAs. And prior to the review of their processes, the focus was on responding to calls and emails in their contact center as quickly as possible. But the reality of that was as soon as the help desk took the call, it would go over the fence into another department and be forgotten about. And no one had end-to-end responsibility for this response time for that particular request. And the way this was overcome was actually to focus on response time as the metric. And they chose to change the process and give the agents the tools via their intelligent desktop to plan the engineer going out and take responsibility and monitor the response time. And the results in this case was 30% improvement in response time. But it's not just about times. Because of that, they were much more involved. The agents' skill level effectively went up. The agents were far more motivated. They understood how their performance impacted the business, and they were given responsibility for it. And because their role was more skilled and more varied, it was a more fulfilling role. And a side effect of this, was a 34% increase in employee engagement. And I think we all know that the story: more engaged employees offer a better customer service. So response time was improved by 30%, employee engagement up by 34%, and overall customer satisfaction, and the metric they used to measure it, was up by 24%. So there's real evidence there of how that balance metric and focusing on the business objective can really deliver the results for you. We've talked again, and Carolyn's talked about first contact resolution, which is often slightly disputed by our initial survey. I think considered to be the most important metric. The graph in the top corner there shows you from the latest Contact Babel Decision Makers Guide, some of the ways that people measure FCR, and some I think are much better than others. And we saw some examples from the audience about the techniques that they're using. I think agent opinion is a particularly poor way to do it, and easily the most common way, and I think that was borne out by some of the stuff that John T. read out earlier, was sort of sampling and monitoring of calls. And this has got some great merits, and like sort of the agent or customer opinion, it is an entirely objective measure. But again, it's still looking at the call in isolation. It doesn't actually tell us, was the customer's case that they rang up to call about dealt with effectively. And this, again, is what we believe that you should really be measuring. How many times have you been told on a call to a call center, yes, that problem's been dealt with and the issue's been processed, only to find out a week later that the problem's still not being fixed. And so that's managing that case end to end and understanding how the call center fits into that case process is key. Not only that, but sometimes when you're dealing with a customer interaction, there may be multiple cases raised at the same time. We've worked very closely with a social housing company, Together Housing, looking at this exact issue. Together managed some 35,000 homes across the north of England, and their contact center receives a huge number of calls about many, many different issues. And what they found as these calls were monitored, often lots of cases are being raised in the same call. A caller rings in to report a blocked drain and requests that it's fixed, but at the same time they may raise the fact that their neighbors are playing loud music all night, or that the tiles have fallen off a roof in a recent storm. And a single issue may well be closed off in that call, but what about the other issues? Understanding how you can track multiple cases within a contact is key as well. I think Jonty mentioned to me before we started the call, if you've got 3 problems, send 3 letters or make 3 calls. Don't hope to get them all solved in an integrated way. And again, you need to have the right process and techniques to get to that answer. Couple more quick things. In the multi-channel world, we must ensure we don't just focus on one channel at the expense of others, and often what happens is businesses focus primarily on call response times at the expense of other channels. For example, email. Take this call center helper survey from last year. They found that over 50% of call center response times for emails was over 24 hours. For many people, this is just simply too long, and you've got to find a way of addressing that effectively, and worry about supporting your other channels as well as your call channels to deliver the excellent customer experience. And as we already said, these non-voice channels are becoming more and more important, particularly to the younger demographic who are demanding instant gratification on social, on email, and other things. The traditional and probably the best way to control response times in this multi-channel world is almost certainly via the universal queue, which is our diagram there at the top right, where all the channels are managed in a single queue, and priorities and acceptable waiting times can be set based on the type of channel and the subject of the interaction. But what we've found when we've analyzed the queues is that quite often live contacts or activations may be about the same issue. Perhaps the customer of a utilities emailed in regarding a meter issue, got no response, emailed in again, eventually given up an email and decided to call the contact center and brave the queue. So you've basically got multiple interactions clogging up the queue for the same request. And what we found a really fantastic solution to this, and a lot of our customers like Global Blue and OVO Energy are basically using the solution. They're basically, when the call is presented to the agent, not only is the active call presented, but any emails, tweets, Facebook posts that are already in the queue are already presented at the same time, and the agent can effectively close off the multiple channel interactions in a single interaction. I need to speed up and just quickly, in summary, say that we've talked about this balance metric. Do think about it and believe in it. Don't treat your contact center in isolation. Make sure that your metrics are supporting that end business objective. Don't forget about cross-channel metrics, especially if you're planning a new strategy for the future. Multi-channel is here to stay. And if anything, it's going to be a bigger issue than voice in the next few years. Break down those interdepartmental dependencies and get your agents involved in not just the call center performance, but in understanding how they can contribute to the overall business performance. I'll stop there. Thank you very much indeed, and back to Jonty.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Paul. I certainly think both multi-channel and interdepartmental issues are one that I think lots of people in contact centers are struggling to do. In fact, it's going to get even worse as we get more and more channels coming through. And on our webinar series, we've already discussed video and Skype as 2 additional channels.
Absolutely.
Trying to get all the reporting on all the different metrics from those is going to be
it's a good game.
It's going to be quite hard. So let's have a look at some more tips and questions and opinions from the audience. Fiona says we measure customer effort because the scores and feedback that it gives us something we can actually act upon to improve service, which I think is it's got to be sort of measurable, but also actionable. I think is quite
good advice.
Quite nice. Sue says we don't currently ask the customer what is important to them. The business has always decided what is important to the customer, and that doesn't always match. That's certainly a sad thing. I think there's a comment here that fits in with a couple of comments fit in with Paul's final point. The agents in my contact centre don't really seem to care about the survey results or the quality scores, and I think the tip from Mark really addresses perhaps one of the reasons why they perhaps may not care is involve agents when deciding on metrics to use, which is Paul's final point. This really does get buy-in to the process. I think there's some quite interesting opinions there. Let's have a look at a few of the tips. Julie, try to not look at any one stat in isolation. I guess that also ties into what you were saying there, Paul.
I would definitely agree with that one.
For an outbound function, we would look at revenue, conversions, calls per hour, and talk time. It works well. We've measured channel sales performance, but this has driven customer shifting rather than attracting new customers. So
I guess it's different businesses have different. It's good to see that people are putting those business metrics right in the front of the agents. And yeah, I think there are some there are issues with doing that as well, and that's quite interesting. As long as they're staying within shifting within the same organisation, that's better than shifting and going somewhere else, I guess.
And I guess the challenge is here is that you always get the law of unforeseen circumstances wherever you whenever you use a metric. And I don't know if anyone's listened to the Freakonomics podcast, but they're absolutely filled with examples of metrics that have driven wildly different behaviour from what people expect.
Yeah, keep an eye on the business objective, and you'll get the right answer, I think.
Okay. Ian, audience opinion is almost a question. My goal is to build a scorecard approach, so a weighting is attached to each element. This is a metric of metrics, AHT, NPS, quality, etc. And the ultimate agent can then be identified. The problem is defining the weighting. So I guess with most
different businesses, different rules, but it's a great idea, and it's and that blended approach across the metrics. Some things will be different for different organisations, but it's the right idea, and the weighting will be very business specific, I think.
And there's an excellent article on Call Center Helper by Alex Loach, who looks at that. I think he calls it an authentic core linkage. So if you go to callcenterhelper.com, type into the search box Alex Loach metrics, and a link will come up there. And hopefully Megan might be able to find that link and post it into the chat room before the webinar.
Otherwise, we'll need some help with the spelling.
L-O-A-C-H, Loach. Make the customer scores visible on the account profile of your CRM. This is the best. This is the way this customer service agent will see whether the customer is on the phone as an ambassador or a derailer of your company or product. Can take this into account, how to approach the customer. Currently, quite interesting, an idea of sharing metrics with agents to help them to self-manage. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it is with some of them. I think we do have to be a bit careful, like we've discussed with AHT, and making sure that the metrics we're sharing are encouraging the right behaviours from them. There is, a question about supporting those agents to understand those metrics and understand how to improve them, rather than just giving them cold hard numbers without the opportunity to discuss and question and get help to improve them. But yeah, it's always good to give people feedback and visibility and be transparent with that.
So we're going to take a few more tips. Our metrics align with appraisals, and we need to set targets into categories of great, good, and needs improvement. This ensures the agents know what is required of them at the start of their appraisal year. We can track this month on month to ensure they're on track. It's quite a nice one.
Good advice.
David says quality is one of our most focused on metrics in the centre. I think our poll earlier showed that as one of the ones that we all felt agents responded to. By focusing on the back end of the AHT, the work time, and taking the pressure off the agents to rush off the phone, we found agents were less stressed and the quality of the call remained high or improved.
I think a couple of people have suggested that, and it's good.
And Fiona says, don't forget to measure advisor satisfaction too. I think that's a great one, because
absolutely
the old adage, happy agents equals happy customers, I think is a really great one to go through. So I'm afraid that we've got loads more material than we have time for. So based on today's webinar, if you could say what you enjoyed most in today's webinar, and so here we are. In one or two words, what did you like best about today's webinar? Slides are also available on Call Center Helper. If you go to our recorded webinars page, the recording will be available later on today, or you can go in on the same link as you've gone through. I know a lot of you like to share these webinars with your team and with your management teams. We've got a few more webinars in the series. We've got a 3-week gap until Thursday the 1st of May for our next webinar after Easter. And just like to say thank you to our 2 panelists. Carolyn Blunt, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to Paul White.
Cheers, John. Thank you very much.
And if you could complete the survey before you leave the webinar, and there's also a button in the chat room to download the chat log if you want. So thank you very much. We're going to pick the winner in the next half hour, and we'll be putting up later on this afternoon onto Twitter for the bottle of champagne or the box of chocolates. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all in 3 weeks' time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.